Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, and that man over there, Seth Price, down in the DC, Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, Timbuktu, and now Australia headquarters of Price Benowitz and Blue Shark Ginger. But we are joined today by someone who is not in the United States, which is kind of cool.
Great.
We had to make this work. We are joined by Caralee Fontenele of Scalable Law. And Caralee, it's so great to have you with us to talk about intake in this intake series.
Well,
Thank
look,
you for having me.
and I am so excited that we're going international because, having studied in Australia, Sydney Uni, St. Andrews College, go Drewsman, and then afterwards being a summer associate there, this brings me a little piece of my 20s back to life. So thank you for being here and waking up early. Look, you now have clients at Scalable Law in the US, Canada, Australia. We're in our intake series, but would love to just hear what are some of the sort of similarities and differences that you see when you're going cross border. My spoiler alert, I'm trying to figure out what can we learn by what somebody's doing in one place well, or things that you see that people aren't doing well that they should be.
I think it's very, very similar when it comes to running a law practice across all of the different countries that I work across. The practice areas, there's probably a few more challenges in terms of how someone runs their firm versus actually the jurisdiction of where they're located. And one of the things that I really noticed, I recently went to Clio, which is where I met Seth. And one of the things that I noticed at Clio, which was in Texas, and it attracted lawyers from Canada mostly and the US, was that they are really all struggling with the same problem that we're struggling with down here, which is finding talent and attracting the right talent. And it really doesn't seem to matter whether you're a solo or a small firm wanting to scale up, or whether you're a large firm with already a great pool of talent to grow to that next level. You need more lawyers to serve clients. And that really seems to be across the board, I think, the biggest issue that law firm owners are facing right now.
When it comes to intake, the thing that most smaller firms struggle with is, look, it's hard enough practicing law. Jay was talking about you're out in court, so you may not be in the office. It's making sure that whatever marketing you do, whether it's relationship marketing or whether it's, digital or something in between, that there's, every firm I feel struggles with that, piece of retaining all of that goodwill that you're building up and all of that energy and resources you put into it. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in your consultancy as far as the pain points people are facing when it comes to making sure that you squeeze as much juice out of the orange as possible.
Yeah, I think with intake, particularly with small firms, they get bogged down and busy doing legal work. And then their intake kind of falls as a secondary, it becomes less important. And if they haven't optimized it, then, and it's not happening in an automated way, then they start to lose traction with attracting and retaining clients. Then they get busy doing work. And then, of course, that work finalizes and dries up. And then they're left at the start again thinking, why is my intake slow? That is a real challenge for them, I think, when they're really busy. And just working out ways how to do their intakes in a new law way rather than the old school law way that they might have grown up with, or where they'd worked previously, how they'd done it. So obviously now there's so many amazing ways and things that we can implement that make it automated.
And what are you excited about? I mean, the J is Mr. Systems, but talk to me about, what are some of the systems, processes, or technologies that you think are, cutting edge that you like for your world, for your tribe?
Yeah. So with intake, so I have a law practice as well. I have a team of 15, and our intake is completely automated away from me. In fact, the whole law firm is automated away from me. I work in my law practice about 5 hours a week. And really, that's what I'm teaching other law firms how to do. And so when it comes to intake and tech, there's a whole lot of ways that you can bootstrap it if you don't have the right practice management system, because what we've found is that not all practice management systems are the same when it comes to intake. A lot of them are focused just on the management of the client matter once you've got the client. And so in my own law practice, we were with a practice management system that didn't allow intake. And so we put a whole lot of tech together to make our own intake workflow, which worked really well. I think the other thing that's really important when it comes to intake, and probably one of the most important things, is making sure that firms are set up to collect data. So knowing what the numbers are, who's calling, are they the right calls, why aren't they converting, why are they converting, and really looking at those numbers on a regular basis. So in my practice, we look at those numbers on a weekly basis. We know every single person who's called, and then you're able to tweak whether or not they're not the right quality when it comes to your marketing funnel. And also you're able to train and mentor your lawyers or whoever's doing your intake to make sure that conversion rate is much higher. And so one of the things that I've found in my law firm, and these are the things that lawyers aren't measuring their numbers. So, what's the conversion rate of your firm? Most lawyers that I'm talking to do not know that. And so implementing that is really important. And then what's the conversion rate of each of your lawyers? And I've found in my own team that I've got lawyers that convert at an incredibly low rate, and I've got lawyers that convert at an incredibly high rate. And so I've really looked into why that is, and working that out so that you can mentor your lawyers so that you can do better in that intake.
So look, what I love, you're talking primarily non-plaintiffs. There's almost like two worlds we've been seeing during this series: the plaintiffs world, the non-plaintiffs world, family criminal, fee for service versus contingency, where you need a signature. That's a nice luxury. But when you're in the fee for service world, you're talking about lawyers signing up. One of the things that I personally would struggle with is when I agree with you completely, and I'm sure Jay will jump in after this, but that you want to know conversion rate, but knowing what you're starting with is significant. If you do it off of phone calls to the office, your number is going to be very different, and your results will be very different between setting what a viable or a want is, some people call it. And then the complication I think comes is who is setting what a want is, because if the lawyer themselves is able to, or whoever's doing the intake is able to say that wasn't a want, your data becomes sort of corrupted, because going back to my dating world when I was down under, if she wasn't into me, well, that wasn't a viable woman anyway. So and so you end up with to get true data, you almost need to have some sort of filter to say this is a gem, and I don't care whether you sign it or not and they tell you there's no money later, this should have been a viable gem. How do you deal with that variable?
So I think knowing the data and looking at the data right from the top of the funnel, so that is right from whatever marketing that you're doing, whether it's ads, organic, whatever it is, referral marketing. When you know your data, you'll also notice things like your referral marketing is going to be a higher conversion than your Google ads, for example, because the referral marketing, they've already had testimonial from someone, right, that you're amazing and that they should go to you. So they've already been half sold to right there and then. So knowing where they've come from is important. Having a really good system.
Do you separate your conversion data for the referrals versus marketed calls?
Yes. Yeah. And also then having a really good system, a scripted system, if you like, where when the call comes into your firm, that they are being weeded out. So the right questions are being asked to make sure, and simply you're not giving away your time. So we used to do, for example, 45-minute initial appointments, or at one point we're doing an hour. We now do 10-minute initial appointments. And the only goal right there is to sell them into either a retainer or a paid appointment. But making sure that the 10-minute or calls are not going to be wasted on someone who really can't retain. So in all lots of different practice areas, you get plenty of people that just want to get the free advice, and if that's them, then they don't get the free appointment. The other thing that we do, and I really encourage all my clients to do, is we set up a automated questionnaire that the client needs to respond to. If they don't fill out the questionnaire, we take that as a filter that they don't care enough about their matter to actually then warrant the 10 or 15 minutes of our time. And the questionnaire is simple, just about their matter, so that we can really cut to the chase when we're on that sales call with the client. So the goal, I guess, is with your data is right from the beginning and the top of the funnel right to the retainer, really looking at that data and tweaking. Why am I getting calls for wills and estates when I'm a family lawyer? Or why am I getting contingency calls when I don't offer that service? And then working out, is your marketing message right? I mean, that's where you guys come in at Blue Shark. Is your marketing message right? And if it's not, what's going on in the back end, and really working that out. But you can't work that out if you don't record all of that and then analyze it as you go.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it could be a full-time job, just analyzing the data, because, for decades, law firms didn't look at any of their data. Now, clearly, in the last, 10, 15 years, people are realizing that data is power and you can do something. At least a small portion of lawyers are looking at it. I still know lawyers that don't have a CRM, and they, hand write open their files, and that's how they operate. But I want to talk about something that you talked about at the beginning, when we first started, because I think there's a conversation to be had there. And you talked about all the firms that you've seen, Canada, US, at home in Australia, are struggling to find talent. And talent on intake is something that I think we've talked a lot about over the last couple of sessions. And the conversation really is intake somewhere where you put somebody who's just learning the process, or should intake be your best people? But if we are dealing with trying to scale our law firm, and law firms are struggling to find the right talent, can you hire a weaker person in intake to fill the seat? Or should you wait and find a stronger person in intake, even if that's going to affect your scalability? And do you have a perspective on this? Because I can see some arguments to be, hey, get a weak person. If they can get name, address, phone number, type of problem, we can have our better people follow up and close them. And then I hear the other one saying, yeah, but they're going to be wasting time. You're going to be paying somebody who's not going to be getting the stuff that we need to identify if they can convert. You're going to wind up spinning your wheels a lot and have your better people talking to dead leads. So do you have a perspective on, should you fill the seat, or should you wait to fill the seat with somebody who's the strongest you can find?
Yeah, I do. And just from my own data and collection as well, I definitely have a perspective, but it depends on what resources you have and what size your firm is. When we're talking and working with solo to mid-sized firms, often it's the lawyer that's doing the intake, because that's who we've got, and when we first start scaling, most lawyers start hiring more lawyers, and they lack sometimes in that maybe those admin roles or more junior roles. So in my own research and my own practice, the more technical lawyer is the worst at converting. The reason that they are the worst at converting is because they confuse the client. They're way too technical, and confused minds don't buy. All a client needs to know is that they can trust you, and that you can solve their problems and get them out of the stress or pain that they're in. That's all they need to know, and that's all you have to do in that 10-minute call. So since I've scripted my people and trained them, the conversion rate has gone up. My most technical lawyer, who bills the most and who's probably the most experienced, she has the worst conversion rate of something like 19%, which is shocking, because we would have to give her 100 clients, all of which would be great clients, and she'll only retain 19 of them. So we will avoid giving those to her, but she's just far too technical, and the clients get confused. And I think your role in that moment is not to be giving legal advice. Your role in that moment is to be filling the client with confidence that you can absolutely solve their issue if they retain. And I think, technical lawyers or lawyers struggle to see themselves as salespeople. And I think what we've got to remember is that being a salesperson is a whole career in its own right. And so, we're expecting our lawyers to switch into salespeople. And I think law firm owners are better at converting because law firm owners are more hungry to convert because they know what it means to convert. Whereas I also feel like there's a few mental blocks when you're getting your lawyers to do the retaining. So, for example, if a lawyer has a very full workload already and they're already stressed out, that I think they're going to be less likely to retain because they're not trying as hard to get that work in the door because they personally don't want the work necessarily. Whereas if you've got someone it's their role to retain, they've got some KPIs set up around that, I think that is a much better option.
What are your thoughts? Earlier in our series, that one of the tribes that advocates for a non-attorney salesperson, as you said those words, you almost make it sound like it's not about the legal piece. And of course, there are places in criminal defense in particular, there's going to be a certain amount of like explaining how you're going to navigate something. But it almost sounds like a good salesperson. This is my personal struggle with, which is on the fee for service side, how much of this should be somebody that has a JD versus somebody who can do exactly what you said a moment ago, which is to emote confidence that they can solve that problem, and that's what the person's looking for, is that piece. How, your thoughts on balancing more expert sales acumen, which very often is hard to find in a lawyer, versus the lawyer because they have a bar license that is able to give legal advice.
I think as well, if you can sell, it depends on what your funnel is and what your method is. But if, for example, for most law firms, we're giving away 10 or 15 or 30-minute free calls. Sometimes I feel like where law firms go wrong is that they are often putting they don't have a system in place, and people are ringing and they're just immediately putting them through to a lawyer, interrupting their workflow. They're then stuck on the phone with a time waster for 30 minutes. And, that can cause challenges. Having a flow where they have to go through a process where they need to book an appointment. Yes, a timely appointment, like the next day. We can't leave it for a week. They're going to go somewhere else. So making sure you've got those intake appointments available. And then for that intake person to have the goal of selling them into a paid 1 hour or 1.5 hour initial consult with the lawyer. If they're going to put their money where their mouth is, they will convert as a client. And then in that 1 hour or 1.5 hour paid appointment with the criminal lawyer, with the family lawyer, or whoever it is, then they're much more likely to then convert to that paid client. And you've had someone else filter it through, right from ad to Calendly to ringing them to doing the questionnaire to, so they've had to sort of go through a bit of a process to get to you in the first place. And I think that works very well.
So I have a follow-up to that. And I'm wondering if, in your experience, it is best to not have the attorneys, because you talk about, you have a highly technical attorney who closes at 19%, so the numbers aren't going to be there. I have found in my experience that either lawyers don't see themselves as salespeople and think of themselves above that process.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, when I was thinking, when I was first starting out, I was like, look, I can sell myself to a jury or I can sell myself to a client, but either way, I'm selling something, or I'm selling my clients to a judge. Like I'm trying to sell something every day. everything is sales in some respect. But some lawyers just can't wrap their head around that everything is sales. But one of the challenges I found early on, which is why we got away from it, was that if you give a lawyer a sales role, all they're seeing is, hey, I'm going to sell and have to put more work on my plate. And I'm not getting
Exactly.
anything necessarily for it other than my paycheck, which I get if I don't close this person.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
100% agree.
is that reason enough to take the sales out away from the lawyers? I know Seth's answer is going to be it depends, and I think it depends on. And by the way, folks, while we were in this session, Seth has said it depends. Caralee just said it. I actually, Seth, do you own itdepends.com? Because it's been bought, and I think we should have Seth Price at itdepends.com as your email address, because everything's it depends.
Well, no, as opposed to like, the evangelist who speaks from stage, it's this way no matter what. I just think it's nonsense. I mean, you don't like the term, but you live your life that way. I mean, the whole point, you wouldn't need a system if it was just one line, it would just be a list. But if everything has an audible, that's why you're able to create systems that are interesting versus just a checklist.
I would be saying it depends.com on the data. Look at the data, and the data, if you've been measuring data for 6 to 12 months properly, as best you can, you are going to be able, it's going to give you a whole lot of clues, and you're going to be able to trial and error a few things to see what works better, and then you're going to have real data to show you, and for us, for example, as a bit of a strategy, because we don't have an intake team, we've got our lawyers that get dished out intake a few per week each, including very junior lawyers who are not yet doing their own matters, but they're capable of doing the intake. What we do is, if we are low on matters, I then just get the lawyers who are great at converting at a much higher rate, at 50 or 60%, I get them to do all the intake, and then very quickly we have a full load again. And so that's using your data to make those kind of decisions, rather than sort of going by a gut feel.
So I have a follow-up to that then. I'm a listener to the Law Firm Blueprint podcast. It is me, and I have an assistant. And I have never tracked intakes whatsoever. I never know what's coming through the doorway or the phone any week. I've got a website. I do some local service ads. As a start, what data should I be measuring in intake? Because I'm sure there's a million things I should do, but what are like the top 3 or top 5 that I should be looking at? Because if I mean, like every lawyer, I could go down a rabbit hole, but there are some things that are not going to matter, right? But what are the things what data points really do matter for someone who's just starting? If
you've got your receptionist or assistant or reception off company on that you're using, they need to ask the question, where did you hear about us? That is not going to be always accurate, because they might say they saw you online, but it might not be that they actually did that, or whatever. But you, as much as possible, what service they actually wanted when they called, because there's going to be a gap between the people you can help and the people that you really can't help. And why are they calling? Why did they get the impression that you offered that service? And so that's going to really help you with your marketing message. So where did they hear about you? Why are they calling? And then we really want to be measuring, like if it's a referral, we want to know who referred so that you can thank them and you can build that referral network out. You want to know as well if they were, when you did the initial appointment with them, if they were someone that could be converted or not, because then you can work out why your filter is letting people through that couldn't be converted. And then whether they converted or not. And with that number of whether they can be converted or not, you can find all kinds of other things retrospectively when you look back. Like if you're recording those dates, how long did it take for them to convert and come back to you. So in different practice areas, that's going to be a different, number. But what that lets us know on, and that's not something you need to measure all the time, but just out of interest, go and do that every 6 months. Because, for example, if you've got a quiet November, but you saw a whole bunch of people back in October, if it's 42 days until they on average convert, then December is going to be busy. So it helps you to manage that flow as well.
Yeah, I think those are really good. It's interesting that you bring up keeping the data. I just this week happened to be talking to a lawyer, and I said, well, I've referred you 23 cases this year. And the lawyer said to me, no, that's impossible. I said, well, I actually keep a list and here are them all. Here are the dates. And I sent them and they were blown away. And I was like, wait, you don't track what we send into you or what other people?
And you're like, where's my referral gift?
Yeah, I mean, I send out cupcakes, but, so a lot of people do nothing.
Well, and I was going to say, the craziest part, because we at this point, a pretty sophisticated intake. We grew from me and a cell phone to a 30-person intake, partially a hybrid, right? Because my feeling is I want to be able to get as much of the nonsense away before it gets to a lawyer or non-attorney salesperson. Like I want to, and Jay answered your question from earlier in the program. To me, I need peak bodies because I want the most coverage. I don't want it to go into voicemail. I don't want to miss a call. I'm not ready for AI yet. And so the idea that we have that, and then having layers, filters. Oh, there is something with a little bit of stickiness on it, like a lower level person can tell you it's a great case. It's a DUI and they have money, right? The person in between may have something that needs further discussion before a lawyer, but filtering at each point. And I feel that as you go through that process and you figure that out, it also allows you to sort of spend less time with that attorney being pulled away and or scheduling them to give them the least interference with their day. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want to filter as much as you can, and you can work that out. I mean, Seth, you've probably done this in your firm, like you've used data to work all of those points out. And then you really don't want to be interrupting your lawyers. The thing with substantial law work, when lawyers have their head in it, as soon as their head gets pulled out of it because they've been interrupted, that is really, it's not the loss of 10 minutes. It's the loss of 45 minutes or an hour and it's really, really difficult when lawyers are having their heads pulled in and out. And so if they've got schedules where they've got appointments blocked out and it's blocked together and all of that kind of thing, it can really help with their workflow, which helps with your productivity as a firm, which helps with your profit and efficiencies. And, so making sure that you're really protecting the lawyers from time wasters as much as you possibly can.
This is interesting. And it just came to me, a lot of lawyers tend to be introverts by nature in that they prefer to work solitarily and they get exhausted talking to people. I have found historically that the best people for closing new leads, new intakes are those introverts because they're not going to waste time getting deep into the weeds. The extroverts, they want to talk, right? They want to talk, engage, and find out more and more and more. Whereas the introverts are like, I got to get out of here as quickly as possible. So I'm going to sell them. I'm going to close and I can go back to my office, shut my door and get to work and be alone. Have you found that there's a personality type that is best attuned towards intake? Because I'm starting to think about it now. I am so much better at closing than my father, who I've been in practice with for nearly 30 years. Statistically, he's an extrovert and I'm an introvert, right? And so I was always, I can close this person in 5 minutes and get their credit card, and he would spend hours in the conference room just getting to know him.
Yeah, I think what the difference is that if we overload people with information, they have to go away and process that information, and confused minds do not buy. If they are confused because you have talked too much, they will not buy. And sometimes at that point in the conversation, the client is the one who should do most of the talking, All you need to say is, yes, we can solve your problem. That, and not try and oversell or try and solve their problems on the spot. As lawyers, we are never going to be able to solve their problems in a 10 or even an hour conversation. We need them to retain us. We need the cost agreement. We need the retainer paid and trust before we can actually start serving them as a lawyer. So I think it's not so much about being introverted or extroverted, but that I can see why an introvert would sell maybe better. It's about actually just keeping it really tight and making sure that you're really just filling them with confidence that, yes, you can solve the problem. And that's where scripting works very well. So we have a script, and I share my scripts with clients where really it's sort of like 5 minutes for the client to really talk about the issues that are bothering them. As you know, there'll be like 1% of law in there, and the rest will be 99% emotional and family law anyway, probably the same in criminal.
I couldn't imagine doing a family law intake. Oof.
And then it's like, shut up already that he said that or did this. It's irrelevant. But anyway, let them talk. Let them, because that's what they need to do, and that helps build trust, weirdly. And then you can talk for a small bit about problem solving, but don't go into like all the risks and that, this is going to be so difficult. And I think that's where some lawyers come unstuck. They're so risk adverse. They're sharing all the problems and the issues. I recently had a plumbing issue at my house, and I had a plumber come over, and he was so painful, like telling me, all the things that he has to do. I don't care. I just want you to tell me you can fix it and tell me what that's going to cost me. And the next plumber came around. He said, yep, I can fix it. It's no problem. I can fix it Monday. And, $7,000 later, the problem was fixed. But I don't want to know all the ins and outs and how he's going to do it and digging this hole and that hole and needing concrete for this and that. I don't need to know all that. I don't want to know all that. That sounds onerous to me. And I think we forget about that when we're talking with clients. They don't want to know all the legislation, all the ins and outs, all the risks. They just want to know, yes, I can solve the problem for you.
Wow. I mean, I got to tell you, Caralee, this has really been a really informative session for me, because I think, sometimes as we get deep into intake, we think, oh, I need to build, the massive script that everybody can follow with all the different permutations and that type of thing. But I really, my biggest takeaway from today is people need to know that they can trust you and you can solve the problem. And if you can communicate that in an intake, your chance of landing them as a client it's going to grow dramatically, because if they talk to somebody else and they only get one of those two, or they get none of those two, they feel more inclined to come back to you. And I think that's a big takeaway from today's session, for me at least. Seth, what's your takeaway from today?
No, I agree. I think it's the focus on, look, I've always said solve the problem. And we very often say it depends. And I think there is a certain amount of audibling, but the simpler you can keep the intake piece where you are bonding with the person and showing that you are the person that will solve their problem, the more likely you are to get the business.
I love it. I love it. All right, folks. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I really want to thank our guest from way down under, Caralee Fontenele. She's with Scalable Law. And if you want to reach out to her, you can certainly do through your website, scalablelaw.com.
Yes, that's right.
All right. And I'm sure they can catch you on socials and all of those things.
Absolutely. I'm everywhere. You can find me, Caralee, Caralee, and Scalable Law.
That's fantastic. I want to thank you so much for being with us. It just was happenstance that you happened to run in and meet Seth at Clio, and this has been a fantastic way to take us international with our first international guest. I couldn't think of anybody better to help us out, especially dealing with this intake, because folks, as you've heard, intake is a problem no matter where you are located. So when Seth does open that office in North Korea, he will be able to staff it with the proper people to be able to answer his calls. So, folks, that's going to do it for us. Of course, if you want to take us on the go, you can take us by subscribing to the Law Firm Blueprint podcast. You can get that wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to give us a 5-star review when you do so. Of course, you can always catch us at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, live in the Law Firm Blueprint Facebook group, as well as live on LinkedIn under Seth's profile. Seth, anything else you want to add this week?
No, I'm excited. It was a pleasure having you, and hopefully get to visit down under sooner than later.
Well,
Now I
there's a
think you got a
conference,
business
there's a
trip.
conference coming, so and conference for law firm owners. So you are welcome to come down and talk to us about. I think this is a great topic.
I think this is a fantastic topic. So I'm in. I just got to get permission from back at home with 4 kids. But
And Jay, does Southwest get to Sydney?
I don't think so.
Southwest. They don't fly that far, but you
Well,
can you can easily come down. There's some amazing American Airlines and Delta. They all come down here very easily.
That's awesome.
12 hours. That's all it takes.
Nothing. 12-hour flight, no big deal. I mean, I think I've been on a Southwest flight that took 12 hours to get from one place to the other. But
having taken the slow boat back in the day, I think the fastest route is 14 hours from LA. So but it is, when you get there, it is worth it, Jay. It is life-changing.
Awesome. All right, folks, that's going to do it from us. Caralee, thank you so much for being with us. Folks, we'll see you next time. Bye for now.